Good morning, Mike.
Morning, Mina. How are you?
Morning, everybody. It's Susan.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay.
Is Beth, if you're on, would you please let us know? Oh, that's Jackie.
This is going to be interesting because there are 3 of us on Zoom at the same time in our house. We'll see how this works.
So Susan, if you disappear, we'll know why.
Exactly.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike, for letting me. I forgot about the whole star sticks thing. Okay, great. I have to participate by phone this morning. Thank you.
No worries. We'll just wait another minute or so.
Hi, Mina, if you're also on the phone. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Jackie.
Okay, I guess we'll get going. I'm not sure if people jump in later. We can catch them up, but I'll open the Thursday, May 28th, 2020 meeting of the Winchester Select Board. We'll try to jump around a little bit and take the agenda items that relate to our town council, Mina Markarius, so we can let him go as quickly as possible. I know it's been busy for him. So, Mina, I don't know if you want to update the board a little bit where we are. I think we've got a couple things on here for you, but maybe we start with the election warrant and how things went yesterday.
Mina, I think you're muted.
I think you're muted still, Mina.
Sorry about that. With respect to the town meeting warrant and the remote town meeting authorizations, on Tuesday, the House passed a version of the remote participation bill. They passed it with some amendments that are sort of non-substantive on their remote participation issues, and then a bunch of other amendments that are more substantive on issues that really don't affect Winchester directly. Those, because of those changes, it has to go back up to the Senate. We're told it's going to be happening expeditiously and as soon as possible, but we have no firm deadline, obviously, from the legislator of when that could happen. There's some rumbling that there'll be a conference committee between the House and Senate, which would be good because that can usually hammer out differences more quickly. We've been stressing to every person that's able to talk to the legislature that they need to move quickly. In the meantime, the court case that we filed last Wednesday proceeded. We got a notice from the court on Friday afternoon asking us to notify the AG's office of the case and get their input and regarding what DOR thinks of this. We spoke at length on Saturday with Margaret Hurley, who's in the AG's office and handles a lot of municipal issues about it. And she filed a really helpful brief with the court before the hearing yesterday that basically said that if the court ordered something, they would think that's enough. They're fine with the procedures. And they want to support this. DOR said the same thing. Your bond counsel, Jay Gonzalez, we also asked him to submit a letter, and he essentially said the same thing. Unfortunately, all of that work happened before the legislator moved on Tuesday, and the legislator's additional move on Tuesday, while positive, led the judge to have a lot of optimism, in my view, about what the court can, what the legislator will get done in the next couple of days. And somewhat understandably, he didn't want to exercise his power to order something if the legislator was going to act. He views this as something that traditionally the legislator should be doing. And so but he acknowledged that we're sort of in a bind and that all the towns are in a bind on this. And he agreed to have a hearing or decided to have another hearing this coming Wednesday so we could update him on where the legislation stands and for him to reconsider whether it's time to issue an order. He seemed to have no objection to the content of the order. He was comforted by the AG's support of it, but was concerned about overstepping from the judicial branch. And we tried to explain to him the urgency as best we could, including the fact that you're sharing the same vendor with multiple towns. The later that you get into the summer, the potential that as things ease up, people might be away, or when schools end, we don't know, but that is a potential. Just the scheduling issues with having to reschedule, 200 town meeting members, et cetera. So that unfortunately meant that we don't have an order in place, which we had hoped to at the end of the hearing yesterday. And we don't have the final legislation. All of that being said, we spent a bit of time after the phone call. Lisa, Mark, Mary Ellen, and myself spoke, and we would recommend the following plan. You have a June 8th scheduled meeting. By all accounts, either the legislator will move early next week, or we'll know where it's going by hopefully early next week, or we'll be back in court on Wednesday. Our thought is that at the moment you should keep the June 8th meeting. As it gets closer, depending on what the legislator and the court do, it may make sense to use that meeting predominantly to vote the new rules into place and use June 11th, for instance, the Thursday that you normally would do a Monday, Thursday. And I know the vendor's available for that date to really get into the business of town meeting. But in any event, we're not recommending you change your schedule. This does, and if there is a need to have Peter redo any of the steps, which we don't believe under the way the legislation is drafted is necessary, we've also suggested to one of the state reps that the state rep that initially filed this, that if there is a conference committee, they can make that even clearer. And we're also suggesting to the judge that we may want him to clarify that the steps you've taken already count, the request from Peter and the vote that you're about to take this morning. So that's where we are. And then when we get to the how the motion works, if you decide to do that, we can talk through that some more. But first, let me just stop there on the legislation and the court action.
Are there any questions from board members or anyone else? So, Mina, we feel like it's pretty likely that independent of the courts, this legislation will pass through the Senate in the next few days.
Mike, I wish I could tell you that I felt that confident. My only pessimism is really just colored by how long it took us to get to this stage. This has been filed for 7+ weeks. The legislator's been aware of the need for something like this for longer. And what's a little bit difficult is unless folks have a way to reach other folks in the House and Senate, our representatives and senators from the 3 towns that we're working with have been doing everything they can to keep us moving. So, leaning on Rep. Day, for instance, or Senator Lewis is great, but I think they're doing everything they can. So short answer is I don't see why it wouldn't pass. The next few days piece is why I'm cautiously optimistic. But I'm not trusting the legislator too much to move that quickly. And they have a lot of other things. It's not just a matter of them not wanting to move, but they are moving slowly on this.
Gotcha. So we do need to take a vote on the remote town meeting, right? I think, I don't think.
Mike, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I just have a quick question. This is Amy. Can we just talk a little bit about like what our options are? I mean, I know we're voting on remote town meeting, but Mina, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on what our options are should the legislation not go through, or I think I'm a little unclear on if we have any other alternatives, to be honest, before we vote.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one alternative is to delay town meeting further. Mm-hmm. For the reasons I mentioned, that's hard to do, and you do have you have a week of a buffer, and so I think it's probably not what I would advise to delay further, but you could delay further into the second half of June and still have town meeting held within the fiscal year. One difficulty that Mark and Mary Ellen are best aware of from their conversations with the vendors is there's already limited dates in this. To use a poor analogy, there's if you have a truncated summer, there's only going to be a few wedding dates, and that's sort of what's happening is we're in June. The towns that need options technology are all doing town meetings now instead of throughout the entire spring when they would have been having them as a vendor. So that's one of the issues. The other option, Amy, is to continue. At this point, now that you've issued a warrant, Peter can continue town meeting for up to 30 days at a time if there is not a sufficient place to do it. And that's really in the moderator's discretion to do. We've, in the towns that have had to use that practice, for instance, towns that were scheduled to go in mid-March, they've almost, the moderator has been doing that in close coordination with the board because I think moderators understand they don't want to be the ones using that power on their own. And that can continue month to month for the foreseeable future. In fact, I think the way the legislation is now written, it's 30 days after the emergency ends. The problem with that is if you go past June 30th, then you're into the DOR budgeting scenario that I think we discussed last week. And with that, you can have a proposed budget that's sufficient for most things. You can't start new capital projects that haven't been approved. You can't, at the moment, although some of the legislation may address this, use a transfer from stabilization funds. You can't transfer from the overlay, so you couldn't use that article, which you typically do. And I believe you can't appropriate new free cash. I mean, essentially, you could continue 2020 free cash, but I don't think you can use a new one. So there's a lot of, it's a lot less of a toolkit to work with than what you would have if you had town meeting. So those are the options that you'll see in the motion that you're about to consider. At the end of the motion, there's a reference to an alternative date. That is in case town meeting essentially has the same question. If they're not satisfied with doing a remote town meeting, whether it's authorized or not, but assuming it's authorized, that piece at the end, the further, that would continue town meeting for in a normal, physical town meeting, not remote, to a later date. That date, in a sense, is not it's a little bit hard to pick what date that is because you don't know when you can meet physically right now. One suggestion, given that Peter can keep moving it, is to just have it on a date later in June to give Peter time to decide when, and you time to decide when to really hold it. Because I doubt that logistically you'd be able to do it, that early in June. But the date could be, and the date could also be just June 11th, knowing that it's going to get moved if town meeting votes it down. So does that answer?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. I one question. I mean, is it worth thinking about all the things you mentioned that if we were to push past June 30th, all the budgetary things that need to be done before June 30th, does it make sense to focus on those for the June 8th and then be able to delay the other motions or the other articles for like a later date when we can, like in September? I don't know, I'm just making this up, but in September, so get what we need to get done June 8th and understand that there's going to be, a delay in the other things. Does that make sense? Because I guess my biggest concern is, the technology as we think about all of this, and try to, I just wouldn't want any of the technology, and I'm sure the technology will work great. I'm optimistic about that. But at the same time, if something were to come up with it and there's people that aren't able to get on, or there's people that don't feel like their voices are heard, that's my biggest concern. And so I just wonder if that's an option.
It is and you've already sort of done that. So just you've streamlined the warrant articles you can control to pretty much the bare minimum, and really the budget and budget related articles.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be most of what you vote. One thing that you'll see in the motions book that we've been working with Peter and staff on is a concept of a consent agenda. And I'm not sure how much I said about this before, but a lot of towns use this not just for remote town meetings, but any town meetings where you can group together non-controversial articles. You limit debate on them, but questions can be asked about them, and you can take them up with one vote, and that reduces the chances that something can go wrong with voting if you do that, and because everything sort of counts in one vote. Any 5 members, or in the way we phrased it is in Peter's discretion, can take an article off of that if they feel like it needs to be debated separately, but it allows some more efficiency. So all of your sort of normal moving around monies accepted from MassDOT and those kinds of things that sail through with Peter reading at warp speed. Rather than have a separate vote that itself could take a while or at least mess things up, it kind of comes in that way. And you do have a fall town meeting, so you sort of have a little bit of a luxury now. Of course, one of the questions, and I know I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I would recommend that the board and Lisa, that you watch closely what's happening here, because it may be the case that you want to schedule a fall town meeting around anticipated waves in this thing. If we're only able to meet in late October, early November, but not later. So just keep that in mind as well. Yeah, and the other option is to not finish all of the business at town meeting. Less than a quorum of town meeting can adjourn the meeting. So one other option that I know Lexington's considering is, if they're sort of stuck with the legislation still pending, is just doing their business, but keeping town meeting open so that they can take a ratifying vote after the legislation passes by remote town meeting. And that if they need to, or if the legislator sort of is already blessed, then a couple of people can get on a Zoom call and adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mina, you mentioned that if we go to the 112 budget, I guess we can't do new capital or transfers from free cash. Is that right?
That's my understanding of it. DOR is just issued guidance about a week ago on this. I don't know how much, they've answered questions about exactly what they mean by everything, but the way their guidance is phrased, it says that capital that hasn't, certainly the capital one makes sense if you haven't voted a new project. You have a couple of capital projects on the warrant. If you haven't voted it, you can't do that. And I believe that's the same with free cash as well, that they're just not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not as concerned with the capital because we usually do those at fall town meeting anyway, but the free cash, so the water, sewer, stormwater utility is running a deficit right after town meeting in the fall declined to fund it. So for the spring town meeting, we either have to increase the water rate or do a transfer from free cash to make up the $1 million deficit in that utility. So what are our options if we can't have town meeting until the next fiscal year?
I don't, Mariano, I can't speak to what is available budget-wise, but just some of the legal options would be.
Yeah, so if we, we can't increase the water rate without town meeting approval, and
right. You could appropriate.
Yeah.
you couldn't use free cash, but you could essentially what the DOR 1/12 budget works. It's sort of misnamed. Everybody's calling it the 1/12 budget, and it's really a month-to-month budget because you do 1 month at a time. You're not limited to 1/12 of your prior budget. You could appropriate just regular, raise and appropriate money towards it, and essentially deficit spend. That's sort of what the process allows for. There are also a few mechanisms for emergency expenditures, at least for the beginning part of the fiscal year. I think the first couple of weeks at least, as long as you make the transfer then. You can use unappropriated funds with a vote of the finance committee, and you don't have to go to town meeting. Lisa and Mark and I have talked about that in a couple of contexts, but basically you can move money around that way. Then I also don't want to promise anything, but there does seem to be some language pending about using, at least allowing select boards to take money out of stabilization funds eventually. And
so we can raise and appropriate for line items that were not in the budget last year.
That I'd have to double check about. And I guess I also don't know if any of the budget was in the line item. Was any of the water and sewer budget in the?
No, we did not do we didn't subsidize from the operating budget, the utility. We did make free cash transfers, but we didn't subsidize from the operating budget.
This is Susan, sorry. It's an enterprise fund.
Okay.
So we're really relying on the water and sewer revenue, the bill revenue.
You can deficit spend for enterprise funds.
Right, but
again,
we don't have enough. We don't have enough retained earnings in the enterprise fund because we spent most of it.
Yeah.
Mariano, I thought Stacy had said that, if we had pushed it out to September or something, that, we would ultimately be fine because of the, revenue from the kind of higher spending summer months. And I guess I understood the month-to-month budget or 1/12 budget as being, a little bit more flexible on the DOR side, but, it's hard to tell what that will look like.
Mike, I think it's flexible with respect to this particular issue. As I'm looking at the guidance, Mariano, I don't think that would be an issue. Spending for an enterprise fund that I think that part of it, and DOR has given every signal that they want to work with towns. The issue are things that basically haven't been approved yet, and that's where capital and free cash come in.
I guess we have enough return earnings to get us through a few months, just not the whole fiscal year. So, okay.
Hi guys, this is Stacy. I just wanted to weigh in. The Mina's right on the money here. I think that the whole idea of like a 1/12 budget is like the minimum base budget. So if there's things that we need to add to the budget that weren't actually included in the FY20 budget, we'd be able to do that with explanation. I don't think we could do like big capital projects and big capital appropriations, but just like simple things that we just might not have budgeted for in the past, we could probably add in operationally. But Mark and I are working on that. I have a 1/12 template going. I've dropped all the numbers in, and I'm just working on like what we think are adjustments right now, like debt service, our pension, some of the things that we pay up front in July and August. So those are the things that we just need to work out what we could put in. I don't think the gateway system's up and running yet for us to see the format that the DOR is looking for. They said by June 1st, so I'm gonna check later today to see if it's ready yet. But that's something that we're working on so that we can at least start, paying payroll and encumbering some of the bills that we know we have to pay right up front. So we can get by for the first 3 months without using the free cash, the 1.3 million that we have in there for water and sewer. We can assume the first 3 months are going to be covered by existing water rates and money in the fund. So that I wouldn't worry about too much about the free cash pieces, because we're not relying heavily on free cash in the general operating budget either. So any real estate and any of the local receipts that we'll get the first couple of months won't have a problem covering what we need to spend the first couple of months, especially that we have in reserves too.
And Stacy, this is Amy. Do we need to do, and maybe this is a Mina question too, do we, for the service charge, do we need town meeting approval for the service charge? I know we do for the rate increase, but do we break those apart?
I don't know if that's a courtesy or if it's a requirement.
Right,
I don't know.
right.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a requirement. Mark and I reviewed that issue.
Okay.
I don't think, reading the language of your bylaw, I don't think there's a whole lot of wiggle room. I think it says rates and charges or something along those lines. I'd have to look back at the language, but I read it and I didn't see a very good way to say that you wouldn't need that.
Yeah, and it's not the right thing to do either, but I just was wondering if we're like, desperate times called for desperate measures. Okay, thanks.
So what I'm going to do is I'll prepare what I think is the 1/12 budget with adjustments. And if there's anything else that you guys want me to add, once I have the DOR's format, then we can talk about any additions for July, August, and September. And we can go from there. But we do have a way to spend if we have to without this town meeting if it doesn't happen.
Can I ask a question to Susan? And then let's say we do this for 3 months or 2 months. How do we then recover that money?
It's not so much recovering, it will just be a delta. So if we did a 1/12 budget for the 3 months, then I would just post the difference in everybody's budgets for the rest of the year once we do have an actual budget approved.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah. We'll just get the budget posted based on what we vote.
Okay, and then just so I know, how often do we have to pay the MWRA? Is that monthly or?
We pay them for 10 months of the year, and I think it starts right in July. So we do, either it starts in July or it starts in September. I'm not quite sure, but it's a 10-month assessment for the MWRA. And then debt service, we've got a couple debt service payments due in July, which would be part of the 1/12 adjustments. So we'd have to just look at what are the out of the ordinary things that aren't necessarily monthly, but that's an exercise that we're going to be going through.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do?
If there aren't further questions, then I think there's a motion that Lisa posted up on the screen, and
Should we have the date in there? Do we need to decide on that?
so we have the so we need the 11th, right? Is that June 11th needs to be in there as well? Is that correct?
So Mike, this gets to a question. This is the date that you would use for, a theoretical physical town meeting.
Right.
If you don't get a yes vote on June 8th from the meeting to proceed remotely, which seems to be unlikely based on the feedback Mary Ellen got. So I think June 11th works, and we'll work with Peter to be prepared to move that further out if we need to. Realistically, I don't think you can prep for a socially distanced meeting in 3 days. That takes a lot of work itself. So I think you can have it, but Peter can keep extending it out till a time that actually works.
Yeah, and I think, Mina, there's also limitations, as you mentioned earlier, on scheduling the company that's facilitating this process remotely for us, right? Because they're busy. So it's a lot of work for them to do this, a lot of like hands-on work. So it's not just flipping a switch for them. It's quite a bit of engagement. So it seemed to me that I think Mary Ellen had said that they could do it on the 11th, and I don't know. It seems like the option that's in front of us now, unless people think otherwise.
So this is Lisa. I just, I don't know if Mark can weigh in. I remember a conversation with Mary Ellen talking about potentially the 17th or 18th.
Yes, Lisa, that's correct. The 11th was available, and then it jumped to the 17th. Apparently, the 15th was not available, and things were getting very busy for the consultant. I think he had like 10 different town meetings like coming up during that period. But the 17th was a date that was open as of yesterday anyway.
So, Mike, if I could just clarify, because I just want to make sure folks aren't missing this. All right. Would the vendor be used if you had town meeting in a traditional way, not remotely?
Probably not.
Okay, because I guess I just say that because this backup date is not for another time it's not the date to have the second session of town meeting or to have the session when you would actually go remotely. This is if town meeting decides we don't like being online, we don't want to do it this way, we want to wait till we meet in person.
Well, I think it's also, if we don't have the authority to move forward by that date.
It's not in this motion. That's why I want to be clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For if you don't have the authority to move on that date, we would just open the meeting. You could have whatever discussion. You just might not take any substantive votes, and Peter would continue it until you could. That would just be like adjourning a session of town meeting. That's why I want to make that distinction. This is the backup plan if town meeting says you guys are crazy, we don't want to meet on this Zoom platform.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which is why it's somewhat of an arbitrary date, because it's unlikely to actually happen in June. The moderator is likely to find it's not safe to do it for a couple of weeks.
So if we had this as the 11th, the moderator could delay it, could postpone it, or no?
Correct. Yeah, the moderator can, and they don't need a whole lot of notice to do that. The provision of the statute that they're operating under to do that was one designed for snowstorms and building damage the night before town meeting or something like that, and so they can basically move it with very little notice up to 30 days out.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve this motion, that this motion be adopted as presented, with the understanding that the date in the last clause is June 11th.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor? Amy?
Yes.
Jackie?
Jackie, you're muted, maybe?
I just said yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you now. Thank you. Susan?
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
And yes, for me, the motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, Mina, for clarifying that.
No problem. Mike, I'm happy to stick around if there are other agenda items that you need me for. Up to you and Lisa, but I can also go. It's up to you.
So, Lisa, I don't know if there's anything here. We had the solar program that's on there and the election warrant. I don't know if there's any other questions on that for Mina.
The solar program, we need to postpone. There are some procurement steps we need to take. And I have a conversation with one of Mina's colleagues actually after this meeting. So we can postpone that. The election warrant, I don't think we need Mina for that.
I don't think you do. Do you want me to say anything? I can give the very quick on the procurement issue. I think what you'll hear, Lisa, is that it's you do need to go through a process, but it's a pretty informal one and not like a 30-day RFP. So that's the good news. I think you should be able to take it up fairly soon.
Great.
And the select board would be able to do that?
Yes, no town meeting needed.
Okay. So I know that we're getting a lot of pressure from the solar company that's managing this process. Lisa, I mean, I know it probably will be, the questions will be answered in your meeting after this, but do we need to schedule something next week to move this forward?
So I don't know that.
You don't know? Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm assuming we're going to be scheduling some meetings for votes for town meetings. So, potentially the board might be meeting on the 8th. So I don't know if it can wait till then. I'll get a better timeline today and I'll let you know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
We should be good, Mina.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mina, thank you so much for all your hard work on this. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll start back at the top, I guess, with the special permit for the farmer's market. Lisa, were there any questions about this, or is this just something that we have to approve for them to be able to sell at the farmer's market?
Yeah, this is an approval needed for that.
So Lisa, guys, I actually have a question about this. They're not going to be serving wine. They're going to be selling packaged wine. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
They might also be like taking orders, like things like that.
Okay. So
we do have other permits that we've issued for this in the past too. I think Turtle Creek and some other places worked with.
So I move that the select board approve the agricultural wine license to keep for sale and or sell agriculturally produced wine for House Bear Brewing LLC at the Winchester Farmers Market on Saturdays from June 13th, 2020 to October 31st, 2020.
Second.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Amy?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
And yes for me, motion carries unanimously 5-0. So we'll hold off on the solar program until next week, probably sometime, hopefully. And on the election warrant, we also need to take a vote.
So do I need to read this? Is that the normal course of that?
Yes. Do you have the document that's
Yes, I do.
Middlesex SS? Yeah.
So I move that we approve the following warrant. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby required to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Winchester who are qualified to vote in elections to meet at the polling places designated for the several precincts in the town, namely precincts 1 and 2 at the Morocco School Gymnasium, precincts 3 and 4 at the McCall School Gymnasium, precincts 5 and 6 at the Vincent Owen Gymnasium, and precincts 7 and 8 at the Lynch School Gymnasium on Saturday, June 20th, 2020, from 12 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. for the following purpose: to cast their votes in the annual town election for the election of candidates for the following offices: 1 moderator for a term of 1 year, 1 seat on the select board for a term of 3 years, 1 seat on the Board of Assessors for 3 years, 1 seat on the Board of Health for 3 years, 2 seats on the Planning Board for a term of 3 years, 1 seat on the School Committee for a term of 3 years, 2 seats on the Library Board of Trustees for 3 years, 1 seat on the Housing Authority for a term of 5 years, 8 town meeting members for 3 years in accordance with the revised precinct lines in effect January 1st, 2012, for a total of 64 town meeting members. Note, precinct 2 and 6 have a vacancy for 1 year. Write-in candidates are available. Additionally, in precinct 5, has 1 2-year vacancy, as well as precinct 7 has 1 2-year vacancy. Hereof fail not, and make return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk before the day of said election, given under our hands and seals this 28th day of May, 2020.
Thanks, Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor: Amy?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
And yes for me, the motion carries unanimously 5-0. Let's see where And I think, we're going to still hold off on the work session until we can kind of catch our breath a little bit and have a more kind of intentional conversation. The other items, Lisa, I don't know what we need to get to.
So I don't know if you want to start assigning any articles. So the last page of the packet has the different motions. Unfortunately, when I share it, it's sideways. Trying to figure out how to make it go the other way.
I think, and rotate it.
Yeah, it's a PDF, so I'm trying to figure it out.
Lisa, I can just send you that document.
Yeah, that would be great.
I can share it. Oh, I can't share it
Let me do this.
because the host has disabled sharing.
Yep. There we go. Multiple groups and share now. Try again, Mariano. See if that works. There we go.
So I think that we are limiting presentations as much as possible for this town meeting. Part of our earlier conversation. So it's most of what is in front of you for the warrant articles. We're going to try to move through pretty briskly. There are some items that may take a little bit longer, but I think otherwise on our side, I don't know if there's anything anybody feels like they want to speak to. I know Amy and Susan were working on the water and sewer rates.
Right.
And just to give everyone an update on the Article 10, which is the Morocco school repairs. At this point, we're requesting about $30,000 for free cash to do a prioritization study on Morocco, so we can identify those needs along with our capital budgeting process, which starts over the summer. So that would allow us to kind of get under the radar on the RFP procurement side, and still get a recommendation by August on what we need to prioritize. We can go back to fall town meeting to ask for some funds for that. So the capital planning committee supported it unanimously last night. I've been working with the school committee and Chris Nixon on it, so they're going to take it up as well. So it will move forward in a similar form to what it was proposed, but we will have to vote on this at some point. Are there any other questions or anything that anybody?
Hey, Mike, this is Jackie. Yeah, it makes sense if Susan and Amy want to do the water rates. If they don't, I could do that. But otherwise, I'm happy to help with either the MBTA easement or the highway fund. But maybe a presentation isn't necessary for one of them. So I'm just volunteering if there would be a presentation, but if not, totally make the efficiency issues that we're trying to achieve with the town meeting. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll put you down tentatively for the Article 5 then. I'm not sure what Peter's going to want us to be doing. I know that under Article 1 reports, he's requested them all to be in writing. So, I think there's a little bit of anxiety of trying to get as much done as possible, as quickly as possible for the town meeting. So we have it under one night. The other items may take a little.
Could I add something at some point on this? I have a couple I wanted to make. One is We just received an email in the last 10 minutes concerning Article 3. It was the citizens petition for the zoning amendment for North Main Street, that's going to be indefinitely postponed. So that's some good news.
Great.
We've been working on that now for about 2 or 3 weeks. So Art Kreger has been in contact with them. And as I said, we just got notice that that's being indefinitely postponed. So we can kind of check that one off for now. The MBTA one, Mina and Beth Rudolph, we're doing the presentation on that, number 5, and I believe they've already recorded their presentation over at WinCam for the MBTA easements. So I just wanted to add those 2 things.
I had a question on Article 11 too. I know that Representative Day had said that there was money in the bond bill for some of the firefighter equipment. Is that, are we still moving forward out of free cash with that, or?
Yes, Article 11, currently the motion reads that it's $137,000 that would be funded from free cash.
Is that a similar request that's in the bond bill?
Lisa, do you know the answer to that? I'm not sure if. Lisa?
I'm sorry, 137,000 for.
Mike was asking about the Article 11, the $137,000 for the PPE for the fire department. Free cash is the funding source, but he was asking if that is included in the reimbursement program.
Yeah, so we are, we're hoping to get reimbursement for that.
We have to appropriate first.
Do we know on Article 22 for OPEB what the source of funding is? Usually we kept it separate to bring it from the overlay fund. But there's usually there's also a raise and appropriate in the yellow sheet for OPEB.
Just 2 seconds, Mariana, I'll have an answer.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mariana, once the OPEB fund became a full-blown trust fund, an irrevocable trust fund, they've been putting it out in an article. So it's not on the yellow sheet anymore. It's out in a separate article. So we don't want to double count it. And I believe they're just putting raise and appropriate. So it's part of the total overall budget.
Yes, Article 22 is raise and appropriate $350,000 to the other post-employment benefits liability trust fund.
Okay, so I added the separate article for OPEB when I was chair in FinCom, and it was specifically to appropriate money from the overlay fund, and we kept the raise and appropriate on the yellow sheet. So now FinCom has removed the OPEB raise and appropriate from the yellow sheet, and they just have it separate.
Yes, that's correct, Mariano. And Town Council had actually suggested too that we keep the OPEB appropriation as a separate article.
Because it is now a trust fund. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Hi, I have a question, it's Susan, and it's on the money for the North Main Street study.
Yes.
That's the planning board's article.
Correct. They're requesting appropriation of $30,000 funded from free cash for the study. And they are making, that is an article that will have a presentation, and it's going to be the chair, Heather Von Mering, making the presentation.
Okay.
So to maybe give some clarification about the origin of that article. So originally in my budget, I had $100,000 in there for the master plan implementation. So I had a conversation with the planning board when we were making cuts that I would take that $100,000 out, and that they would instead find a specific project that they prioritize and appropriate a specific amount for that that particular part of the plan they wanted to push forward. So that's what this is.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
On Article 16, I see the summary here says race and appropriate. So it's not going to be, is it race and appropriate? I thought originally it was going to be free cash transfer.
It just should say appropriate.
Stacy is here with me. That was one of the corrections we went over this morning. The raise and appropriate will be removed. It's just going to be appropriate.
Oh, it'll just be appropriate. Okay, so it'll be appropriated from free cash.
No, we don't have to say free cash.
What Stacy, I don't know if you can hear her, but she's saying that it wouldn't state here that it would be free cash. It would just be appropriate funds for the water sewer enterprise. For this, then the motion itself would explain exactly whether this is rate revenue or whether it's a general fund appropriation. So we're
I see. Right. Yeah. Okay. So, but I guess the motion, if Article 6 fails, then the motion here, I guess I'm trying to figure out, will the motion read appropriate from free cash, or will it read raise and appropriate?
Stacy.
It'll say, there's a whole box that says the funding sources for the water and sewer fund. So it's going to say such and such from water receipts, such and such from the chapter 110, and then such and such from free cash. So it will be laid out on the yellow sheet that way.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Mariano, that's an excellent point you've raised, because Stacy and I had talked to Nicole about this, and they're assuming for Article 16 that Article 6 does not pass. So the motion that they're putting forward on the back of the yellow sheet will assume the $1.3 million is coming from the general fund. Yep. So what'll happen is if Article 6 passes, then we'll have to amend the motion under Article 16 to include the additional revenue. Okay. That's how the FinCom chose to present it. So,
do we know that have they voted a recommendation on Article 6?
I don't believe they have. Nicole had mentioned to me yesterday that they were going through this evening and starting to take positions on the various warrant articles. But I don't believe they have, but I'm not positive. I know they voted the water sewer enterprise budget itself, but I don't believe they've voted Article 6.
Okay.
I imagine they support it.
Mike, would you mind if I just gave a brief overview of the consent agenda, just so I don't know if that would be helpful at this point, how Peter's going to handle that at town meeting?
I was going to ask that, so that'd be good. I was going to ask Mike. I was going to ask, it's Susan. I was going to ask Mike or someone to just, run through that, please, because I know there's been some discussion about how to do this.
So the way it's going to be structured is we're going to have consent agenda articles, and I can go through real quickly and tell you which ones at this point have been flagged to be consent agenda items. And the way it would work is, and I believe there's 10 or 11 of the articles out of 25 that would be in the consent agenda. The consent agenda would be taken up at the very beginning of the town meeting. And if a town meeting member, it would take 5 town meeting members to remove an article from the consent agenda, and then it would become I'll call it a regular article or a standalone article. But the idea is that some of the routine articles, and as I said, I'll run through the list quickly, is that we can kind of get them out of the way. If 1 or 2 are pulled out, they would just be done with the remaining articles, the remaining like 14 articles, I believe. So it's just a way to kind of move the town meeting along. There wouldn't be any presentations made for any articles that are in the consent agenda. And anyway, let me run through the list quickly. So Article 1, reports, obviously consent agenda item. The voting actually Article 3, which is being indefinitely postponed, would be a consent. Voting technology, Article 4, that's getting indefinitely postponed. It's going to be taken up at the fall town meeting. That's a consent. The transfer to supplement FY20 budgets, Article 7, consent. Article 8, the PEG money, also. Article 12, the lead neck replacement appropriation or borrowing authorization, since that's like year 4 of a 5 or 6 year program. Article 13, that's the closing out of completed capital projects, putting money back into the 2 stabilization funds. And then we drop down to Article 18, which is putting money into the funds, which is basically just the $30,000 going into the building stabilization fund for that, the boiler, I believe, that was done years ago. It's a kind of a payback since they went with a higher efficiency boiler unit. The 19 revolving funds, once again, a standard article. 20, standard article, short-term borrowing for the treasurer to be allowed, in anticipation of revenue. 21, state highway fund, that's chapter 90, consent. The OPEB, article 22, consent. And 20, and that's it, actually. 22 would be the last consent article. Everything else would have a presentation attached to it, and lastly, on 15, 16, and 17, although they're not consent items, there is the operating budget, which is 15, 16 is the water sewer, 17 is the recreation. We're going to be doing some groupings or lump together some of the budget motions so that we would, instead of doing general government, department by department, Peter's allowing us to do some, where we take general government as a total, or culture, recreation, health and social services, public safety, DPW, those would all be done as groupings. All the capital on the back of the yellow page, there's like 8 or 9 or 10 capital projects. Those would be grouped together. I think all the, between 15, 16, and 17, I think you're reducing probably 40 or 50 motions down to, I think it's like a 10 or 11. So it would really cut the time back, on what would be needed. So anyway, that's just a very brief overview of where we are right now. But Mary Ellen and I have been working with Peter Haley on this, and the whole idea is to try to streamline things as much as we can.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
Were there any other questions for Mark about any of that?
That seems really helpful. So I'm assuming that number 5 is all set then, as far as presentation. It sounds like Mina and Beth have been working on the presentation and via WinCam. So I'm assuming 5 is all set. Is that right, you guys?
Yeah. That's correct. As I said, that has already been recorded. They were the first ones over there, Mina and Beth. And
that's great. That's helpful.
Yeah, it worked out really well. Beth had a nice PowerPoint presentation, and they worked together. And they, I haven't actually seen the video or whatever, but I understand everything worked out fine. So
I posted online.
If there aren't any other questions on that, I just had one question in regard to the Article 5. Lisa, where are we with the MBTA? Are we still kind of on track for the fall with construction?
So the MBTA is still looking to go out to bid as soon as they get approvals from the town meeting select board. And I think we need to circle back to them. They were looking for an example of what the documents would look like that they would actually negotiate with the board. And I know it wasn't as straightforward as giving them prior examples. So they're, but they've, once town meeting approves the easements, then they're going to work on you know, the nuances with the select board. And then once they do that, they're prepared to go out to bid. They hope to have a contractor on board by late summer, early fall. And they did commit to, in a previous meeting that we have, to hold off on taking up what they call pre-designated parking spaces until after the holiday season, which is something that was a priority for the chamber. And we're trying to get a clarification. So they'd verbally given us that. I wanted it in writing. They gave us something in writing, and we're trying to get a clarification of what exactly pre-designated spaces means. So we're kind of working out that particular piece, but so they can mobilize and they can start construction in the fall, but there's limits to what they can do if we are going to ask them to not use a lot of the spaces, the parking spaces.
That sounds great, Lisa, that
Thank
we're going to sort of protect those parking spaces for the downtown merchants until after the holidays. That would be great.
Any other questions? I think we can wrap it up unless Lisa, if you have anything else, or Mark.
Can I just ask a quick question? So where did we land on the article? So is everything all set as far as presentations, other than possibly on the rates? And Mike, what you're going to be presenting, that then we're all set?
I think so.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, Jackie, Susan and I are doing the presentation tomorrow at WinCam for Article 6.
Right.
So I've got
Sounds
one last thing for Mark. Maybe you can help answer this. So there's a mock remote town meeting tonight. So I'm not sure exactly what we're asking the select board members to do, if we want them to participate or do a run through.
I think Mary Ellen was hoping that the chair would come to the studio,
Yeah, I'll be there.
the Cam studio, and everyone else would be able to do it remotely. I believe Nicole is attending. I think she was trying to get Michelle, you know, the chairman, or the chairs, I should say, of the various boards. Peter Haley will be there. I think Peter's going to just kind of be going through and explaining kind of how this is going to work, how the consent agenda, which is kind of what I just explained a few minutes ago. I think he's going to get into those details, and then they're going to go through. They have some, the vendor's done some PowerPoint presentations, nothing to do with town business, but just presentations that are going to be made just to make sure everything kind of works the way that it's supposed to work. And then they're going to be taking some votes to see, you know, that everything is functioning properly. You know, when motions are put forward, that Peter's able to do the counting of the votes, and everything goes hopefully the way it's supposed to. So she's working on an agenda with Peter, like between last night and this morning. So hopefully we'll be able to get more details out to you guys, so you know you understand exactly how it's going to be run. But I think she's trying to limit, you know, the number of people that actually go to the WinCam studio. So more to come, I guess. So.
Hey, Mark, it's Susan. I have a question, and maybe this will be in some further email that Mary Ellen will send out. But I've been getting, you know, as a town meeting member, I get emails from, you know, through my personal account and personal email address. And then I also have a Zoom account through the town, which is through my official email right?
Yes.
So I'm guessing I should go with, try to get on, and because as part of the idea is to test the technology and signing in and everything, just go with my personal email and my town meeting sort of credential and try to join the call or join the Zoom and the the vote platform from there.
Yeah, let me, I'm going to be talking to her later this morning, but I believe she was trying to get out to everyone for town meeting members. Susan, you're a town meeting member?
Yes.
Okay. Access, like an access code, that would be something that you would plug in as a town meeting member that for voting purposes. And I just need to check with her to see what the timing of that is, because she's been a little under the gun because the vendor, just between us, I guess, hasn't been the easiest to kind of work with on the scheduling end of it, because they've been overwhelmed, I guess, with the number of other towns that they're dealing with. So she wasn't able to get confirmation about tonight's dry run until just like the end of last week or something. So
okay.
But I'll talk to her about that so that she can get something out to you guys so it's clear.
I believe she did, and I got that in my, as a town meeting member through that email. And I just wanted, if you're going to talk to her, if you could just confirm with her that I should be wearing my town meeting member hat and use all of that information, not the town, not my town email and not my town Zoom account either.
I got you.
Okay.
I'll get an answer for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other items or any other questions?
Mike, what is the advisory board?
This is good.
So I think that we can probably take that item off. When we were discussing this kind of reopening topic, we had discussed having the reopening committee that's kind of a subset of the Chamber of Commerce that would be focusing on the town center and local businesses, and then a separate, kind of board like they do at the state level that is pulling together the schools, the town, nonprofit sector, the interfaith community, just to have everybody be kind of contributing to the conversation of what things will look like moving forward from here. Of course, the health department, things like that. So I think we're kind of doing that anyways. And at this point, I really don't think on the town side there's bandwidth for another group and another set of meetings. I think we're at maximum capacity. So we can probably pull that off unless people feel strongly. It's certainly something that we can address moving forward. But at this time, I don't know how we would shoehorn it into what everybody's doing.
And BLW engineers.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
For 9,600.
You did?
Okay. So it doesn't mean they have money. Like
Sure.
whole future stuff.
Yeah.
They probably didn't anticipate any.
So I guess we can take a motion to adjourn unless there's comments or questions.
So I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, I'll take a roll call vote. Mariano,
Yes.
Amy,
Yeah.
Jackie,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
and yes for me. Motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. Thanks, Lisa, Mark, Stacy.
Yep.
Patty, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.